Latin poetry seems difficult, but it doesn't have to be difficult. If you have the right set of keys, you can unlock some of the most beautiful writing that's ever been composed. So I'm going to try to keep these lessons short in this series and not get too deep into the details. But if you do want to learn more about any of these topics, I'm going to try to find some videos that do go into detail and leave a list in the description. Key number 4, meter. Keys 1 through 3 were about finding and evaluating the syllables, so now it's time to put those syllables to work. When we say meter in poetry, we're talking about the rhythmic structure of a verse. For most classical poetry that you'll encounter, there are only a few basic building blocks that the poet will use to build this structure. In poetry, these building blocks are called feet. And I'm only going to talk about 4 today. The iamb, the trochee, the spondee, and the dactyl. Once upon a midnight dreary, as I pondered, weak and weary. In the first line of Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven, we can see that he used 8 repeating trochee feet. In technical terms, we call this meter a trochaic octameter. Octa, of course, being the Greek for 8. So 8 feet of trochees is a trochaic octameter. I am Sam, Sam I am. Do you like green eggs and ham? I do not like green eggs and ham. I do not like them, Sam I am. So in the opening line, Dr. Seuss uses, it's actually a foot called a cretic. It's really super rare in Latin and in Greek. But then the rest of the poem is just repeating patterns of 4 iambs. Technically, we call this an iambic tetrameter, tetra being the Greek for 4. So 4 feet of iambs, an iambic tetrameter. Some meters can be hard to describe. They're not impossible, though. We're still going to see the same iambs and trochees and spondees and dactyls from before. So let's go ahead and switch over to Latin now. Remember that classical poetry bases its patterns on long and short syllables, not the stress. Qui do no lepidum novum libellum. Kind of like what Dr. Seuss does, the first part of this line is different, and then it falls into that pattern of trochees at the end, right? Here's a little bit more so you can see what I'm talking about. Qui do no lepidum novum libellum, arda modopum expolitum, corneli tibi namque tu sole bas, meas sala quid putare nugas, iam tum causus assunesi talorum, omnium tribus explicare cartis, doctis Jupiteret laboriosis. So we see the first 2 syllables has a little bit of variation, and that's okay. Actually, it's more than okay. Sometimes these variations can provide your ears a small rhythmic break without distracting too much from the main pattern. Poets have freedom to break the patterns that they have put themselves into. It's okay. So poets can choose meters to evoke certain feelings. The meter we just read from Catullus is called a hendecasyllabic. It's a Greek word. It means 11 syllables. And it's bright and it's cheery. A meter called the choliambic, sometimes known as the limping iamb, is used in satire. Horace wrote his odes using meters which were typically associated with Greek lyric poetry. But there's one meter widely known for the epic poetry of the Iliad, the Odyssey, and the Aeneid, the dactylic hexameter. Before I show you the dactylic hexameter, though, there's one thing that I want to make clear. Music and poetry are linked. They're basically the same. In fact, in most instances, they are the same. Classical poetry was meant to be accompanied by music. And so the notation for poetry is very similar to music notation. The feet we've been looking at are equivalent to bars of music. So it might help you to visualize these metrical patterns through music notation. So I'm going to do that from now on. And I'm going to use a metronome for this next part to help to highlight my point even further. Arma virumque cano Troiae qui primos aboris Italiam fato profugus lavinaque venet litora multilet terris jactatus et alto vi superum saevae memorem iunonis abiram multa quoquet bello passus dum conderet urbem inferetque Deos latiogenes unde latinum albanique patres atque qualta, moini aromai. The first 4 feet of the dactylic hexameter can either be a dactyl or a spondy. Well, how can that be? Where's the pattern if over half of the line can be whichever one it wants to be? Well, we're putting this to music. 2 short syllables are equivalent to 1 long syllable, no different than how 2 half notes make up a whole note. The entire line is balanced on the whole. Poets have some freedom in the structure. Not a whole lot, but some freedom. They might use a string of dactyls if something quick or exciting is happening. Or they might use the long spondies to evoke sadness or gravitas. There are tons of different meters, and that's fine. Some meters are rigid. Some seem so random it's hard to find a pattern at all. Some poems even alternate lines between meters, going from, say, a dactylic hexameter with 6 feet to a dactylic pentameter with 5 feet. So being able to arrange your words in a rhythmic pattern is one of the main things that defines poetry, and it's super important, not only for Greek and Roman poets, but for modern poets. Songwriters too. Music is poetry, and poetry is music. That's about it. This one took longer than the other ones. It's the most important one. It took us a while to get here, but it is what it is. All right, so next time we're going to talk about wordplay. See you then. Bye. Classical music was meant to be accompanied by music. Classical music? Did I say classical music or classical poetry? What is wrong with me today?